Holy smokes, we're on to set number 10, which is still solving using a square root, but now we're going to do ones that are a little bit harder. But really, they're only a little bit harder because you still got something squared here on the left side. And you'll note in all of these questions, I didn't even give you any other numbers on the front or on the end, which, you know, even then you could solve those. You just get the squared thing by itself so that it's by itself and it's easy to work with. So we have something squared here. How do we get rid of the squared? Well, we take the square root. So let's do that. Let's take the square root of both sides. The square root and the squared cancel each other out because everything here is in a group. And so the squared is the outermost shell right now. And so we can rewrite this as x plus 3 equals, now the square root of 16 is 4, but remember when we take the square root, it's got to be plus and minus. It's got to be plus and minus, so make it plus and minus. Okay, then at this point, you could subtract the 3. I personally like to, at this point, write it as two different equations, at least for my Algebra 1 students, because at this point you really have x plus 3 equals a positive 4, and you have x plus 3 equals a negative 4. And so that makes it a little bit easier to then do the minus 3 and get x equals 1, and then do the minus 3 over here, and negative 4 minus 3 is x equals negative 7. What students tend to do if they don't break it apart here is they tend to go 4 minus 3, which is 1, and so they end up with plus and minus 1. But the plus 1 works, the minus 1 doesn't. If you put negative 1 in for x, negative 1 plus 3 is 2, and 2 squared is not 16. And so this is what you should end up with, x equals 1 or x equals negative 7. All right, so let's go ahead and try one more. Okay, let's try 5 more. And so let's take the square root. Take the square root of both sides. Because the squared is the outer shell, we'll take cancel out the root and the 2, which leaves us then with x minus 2 equals plus or minus. Now I don't know what the square root of 80 is, so I'm going to leave it for just a minute as the square root of 80. Now if I do the square root of 80, I know that 80 is 16 times 5. If you don't know that, then just use the tree, break it up into pieces, it's fine. Simplify the root though. So I've got x minus 2 equals plus or minus. Now the square root of 16 is 4. I can't take the square root of 5, so I'll leave that. Now at this point, if you want, you can rewrite it as two pieces. X minus 2 equals 4 root 5, or x minus 2 equals negative 4 root 5. And so then we can add 2 to both sides. And it's actually conventional to put the constant without the root first. So 2 plus 4 root 5. Or add 2 here. Again, conventional to put the constant without the root first. So 2 minus 4 root 5. And so those would be your two answers. Again, it's okay to write this answer as 2 plus or minus 4 root 5. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay, let's go on. Let's look at number 3. We'll take the square root of both sides because I've got something squared. That cancels out. I'm left with x minus 5 equals the square root of 100. The square root of 100 is 10. But please remember, it's plus or minus. Okay, at this point we'll go x minus 5 equals positive 10, and x minus 5 equals negative 10, and then we can add 5 to both sides. And so we got x equals 15, and then add 5 to both of those, and I've got x equals negative 5. And so those are both possibilities, x equals 15 or x equals negative 5. All right, let's do another. Because we're having so much fun, we take the square root of this one. The square root and the squared cancel each other out. So we've got x minus 1 equals plus or minus square root of 60. All right, now 60 is 5 times 12. 4 times 15, so 4 is a perfect square. So let's maybe start with that. So 60 equals 4 times 15. So we'll go x minus 1 equals plus or minus square root of 4 is 2. I can't take the square root of 15. 15 is 3 times 5. There's no other perfect roots there. So at this point we go x minus 1 equals 2 root 15, or x minus 1 equals negative 2 root 15. And so then I'm going to add 1 to both sides. Same thing over here. And so I should end up with x equals 1 plus 2 root 15, and x equals positive 1 minus 2 root 15. There you go. We got 2 left. We got 2 left, and we are just cruising. So here we go. Let's change colors. Green's getting boring. We'll take the square root. Square root and the squared cancel out. We're left with x plus 7 equals the square root of 49, which just so happens to be 7. But don't forget the plus or minus. All right, so we've got x plus 7 equals positive 7, and x plus 7 equals the negative 7. We'll minus 7 from both sides. So I got x equals 0, minus 7 over here. I got x equals negative 14. So x equals 0, or x equals negative 14. I'm just going to rewrite that so it looks a little bit nicer. There we go. Now on to the last one. What do you think we're going to do? Well, let's see. We took the square root there. 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 So I think we're going to... Oh yeah, take the square root again. So let's take the square root because we're trying to get rid of the squares, right? The opposite of a squared is the square root. And you do the opposite, or in math we call it the inverse. You do the inverse and they cancel each other out. So we're left with x plus 4 equals, now what's the square root of 1? Plus or minus 1. Don't forget the plus or minus. So then we've got x plus 4 equals positive 1. X plus 4 equals negative 1. Now, we're doing this plus or minus thing, but please don't start throwing pluses or minuses around everywhere that you go. It doesn't happen all the time. We haven't ever needed it up to this point. Why is it a plus or minus? Because we took the square root. It's when you take the square root of a variable that the answer could be positive or the answer could be negative, because see, you're squaring it. And so when you square it, the negative goes away, so it can be positive or negative. So just keep that in mind. All right, we'll subtract 4. We've got x equals negative 5. And so there we go. X equals negative 3. X equals negative 5. Again, any of these, you should be able to put the number in for x, and it should still work out mathematically. There shouldn't be any problems. So hopefully that makes sense. And hopefully you get the right answer. Cheers.